Okay, another E36 video. Today we're going to put a purple tag steering rack on my E36. I'm in the pit of doom because of filming purposes more than anything else. I've done this before. I've actually got a purple tag rack on the car already. You can do it on your back no problem, but it makes it much easier to film if we're in the pit. The rack that I've got on it has got a dead spot in the middle and I'm not happy with it. I'm about to do about 800 miles on the motorway, so I'm going to put a new rack on it today and show you the actual process of going through it, unbolting the old rack, draining the new rack, flushing the rack, and then finally we'll give it a little test drive and hopefully it'll be all good. Okay, so at this point you want to remove the wheels and remove the track rod ends from the steering rack. Then follow the next steps to remove the rack from the car. You're going to see whilst you watch that the wheels are still on the car because I've tried to cheat and leave the track rod ends on the hubs, but it wasn't a very easy way of doing it. So follow the next steps and you should find success.
There we go. Lovely. So it all pops apart. One track rod end loose, which is actually in not good condition, and one rack loose. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to disconnect all of the fluid lines, let the fluid drain out, and then I'll start thinking about actually unbolting the rack, which is these two bolts here, and the whole rack itself slides forwards and down. We'll be able to then take it out of the car. Before I forget, we obviously have to undo the steering column. That's one pinch bolt that we'll do from above, so we'll get out the pit and we'll show you that once we're at that point. The first thing we've done is we've followed this return line here, which has got the rubber hose that goes all the way up to the reservoir. It's a bit difficult for us to get decent footage of that, so if you can imagine on the end of this we've got a Jubilee clip, excuse the fluid leaking out, which then goes up to the reservoir. Now at the moment I've just disconnected that because I'm not keeping the fluid out of this, I'm going to put fresh stuff in. The next process for fluid lines is to remove this 10mm bolt here that attaches the feed line to the actual rack itself, and then we round here, which is a bit difficult to actually spot, where the tips of my finger are, there are two banjo bolts that connect the fluid in and the fluid out from the power steering pump. So I'm going to nip them off, undo the 10mm bolt, and then we'll go up on top of the car and we'll get the column undone from the top of the rack. Okay, so there's the return loose there. We've got a 22mm banjo bolt and a 19mm banjo bolt. I'm going to undo, I've just nipped the 22, so it's finger tight now, that's for the return hose. The 19 is for the feet, so we'll get that one loose now as well. I'm just unwinding the 19mm banjo bolt now. If you wiggle the lines as you do it, it'll allow you to undo them all by hand. Right, and that's now off. So I'm just going to catch the hardware and we'll bring the feed line down and let it hang free out of the car. We've got the fluid lines disconnected. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to remove the auxiliary belt. It will be explained a bit later on when I come to actually drain and flush the new rack, but it's easier if I do it right now. So I've got a 16mm socket, pop it on the tensioner, pull it towards me, or towards the driver's side of the car, slip the belt off the pulley and then let it pop back up. It's all sprung, so it comes off quite easy. So the next thing I'm going to undo is the bolt down here, which is the pinch bolt at the tip of my finger, which holds the column onto the rack. That's an E10 female Torx socket you need for that. Okay, so we need to undo now the two main bolts that hold the rack on. These are 15mm nuts and bolts. I've got a spanner shoved up underneath the actual engine block here on the back side. Okay, so we've got a nut and bolt like that. That goes through the rack in this orientation, the nut on the top. Okay, so now we've got the rack loose, the whole rack can now slide forwards towards the front of the car. It is a tight squeeze and needs a bit of a wiggle every now and then, but it will come out fairly reasonably. There we go, one steering rack removed. We're going to take it out the pit. We're going to remove this part of the steering column from this rack and transfer it onto the new one. We're going to remove the dust cover that we've got here from this rack and put it on the new one, and then we'll pop the new one back in the car. What I'm doing first of all is I'm just removing the nuts from the steering rack ends. We want to save them because we don't have new ones of these. The column here is attached by a nut and another pinch bolt. Okay, so the pinch bolt comes out nice and easily like so. This part of the column then, with a bit of persuasion, will just run off the end of the rack. What we're going to do is we're going to remove this dust cap, and I'm going to reuse this dust cap. Now this one, as you can see, has been cut down fairly dramatically. A problem I encountered before when putting this on, the one from the E46 doesn't fit the 36 steering rack column, so you need to trim it down something like this so that it doesn't foul any part of the power steering pipework once you put it on the E36. So here we've got the two racks next to each other. We've got the remanufactured one at the bottom, the old one at the top. They both got exactly the same purple tag, exactly the same rack. We're going to then pop this down into the car. I'll take off these bungs before we obviously take it down there, and then we'll get it bolted up and we'll show you how we flush it. As you can see, it bolts straight up to E36 chassis. The only difference are the track rod ends. You can't use the E46 track rod ends, you've got to use the 36 ones. So we'll do up our two main bolts again, and as much by hand as we can. We'll take our banjo bolt with fresh crush washers. It's very important so you don't end up with it leaking. You don't want it leaking at this point. And we'll feed this all the way up the back here, trying to avoid fluid coming down. We've got the banjo bolt through the fitting there. Remember, you need a crush washer on either side of the pipe so you get a good seal on the rack. And that's our 19mm pipe attached, so that's the feed pipe. And we'll start the return hose by coming in over here, and we'll bolt up the 10mm bolt to begin with. That'll hold it in place for us. But we won't go too tight with it because we need a bit of play so we can get the banjo bolt back in. So again, two fresh crush washers on the banjo bolt. Okay, so we've got one crush washer up against the head of the bolt. We've got the fitting will be in here, and then the next crush washer is going to sit about there. So because you can't see that, I'll just pop all this on. You want to get one of your rack bolts in on the right hand side. Get the nut on the top, but don't make it tight. What you need is a bit of pivot like this in the rack. The reason for that is because you've got to get the column to line up with the other part of the rack. So what we need to do is get all the column basically in the right place. Okay, so now we've got the column back together, we can now bolt up the rack. As you can see, the bolts fit beautifully from the E36 chassis into the E46 rack, it's not a problem. 15mm. So at this point we've now got the track rod ends back on, we've got all the wheels back on, but we've got really bad alignment. So we need to try and make it as close as we can to correct before we take it to an alignment shop. As you can see here, we've got the track rod end completely loose. What I'm basically going to do is I'm going to screw in the steering rack end to the track rod end, especially on this side because this one's far out, with an aim to trying to get this as accurate as it possibly can be before it goes to the alignment shop. So what I've done, if you look really carefully, I've tried to make an idea of how many threads we can see here before the nut. And I'm going to screw the steering rack end in basically as far as it'll go until that almost nips up, and I've got the same on this side. So to get a rough judge, that's I think the best way we can do it. You should be able to get it fairly close like that. Okay, so the way to flush the rack, as you might have seen before, is to have the return pipe somewhere over here. I actually cable tied it onto the anti-roll bar. All you've got to do to do it without having the car engine running is remove the auxiliary belt and spin the power steering pump clockwise. And as you're doing that, you want to move the wheels left and right. So if you just push on the wheel and spin it, and then keep doing that. So bring it back and spin it. And what you'll then do is you'll pump the fluid through the system. Now it's come out really clean on this rack, so I'm not going to go any further with it. I'm just connecting it back up now, and we will then get up above and we'll bleed it properly using the steering wheel turning full lock to lock. Just so you know, the routing of the belt is as so. Remember, you just need to put your socket on here and stretch the tension out on the belt, and then you can bring it right over the power steering pulley. Right, okay, so we've got it in, we're test driving it right now. It feels 100 times better. There's no dead spot in the middle. It's doing everything it should do. The steering wheel's a little bit off kilter, but I wouldn't expect anything less, putting it all back together by hand. All it needs to be done now is get it aligned, and I'm pretty happy. So there you go, steering rack, E46 into E36, job done, pay more out.